We have with us today the legendary journalist Soledad O'Brien. Soledad O'Brien needs no introduction. She's an award-winning documentarian, a journalist, an author, a speaker, a philanthropist. Her most recent project includes executive producing a really brilliant documentary that we watched yesterday that is now nominated for an Oscar called The Devil is Busy. Soledad O'Brien, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. I was saying more. Don't stop with that introduction. It was the best ever. Thank you. I might be getting my voicemail on my phone when people call me. How are you guys? Good.
How are you? I also saw you in a picture at Mardi Gras. You were like on a float.
So much fun. And my big worry was it was going to be like this drunken fest, which I think it is in the audience, like the people, who are the crowds. But on a float, like there's no bathroom. So nobody, like you're on a float for 5 hours.
Oh my God.
There's no drunken people on the float, like at all.
Yeah.
No.
They're like people
two bottles working. Yeah. Yes. It was a lot of fun. It was lovely. It was great. And then the mayor gave me the key to the city. And then I guess you toast with champagne and you're supposed to take the glass and then smash it. And I kept saying like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. Like there's people around. They're like, no, you have to smash the glass. I'm like, no.
I'm all set with the smashing.
It's like, smash the glass. My kids are like, smash the glass.
So did you keep it?
I had to. Peer pressure. I did. And then people came by and cleaned up all the glass. Because I was worried, who smashes a glass when there's tens of thousands of people in the street around the glass? That would be insane. I also a little wary of throwing things at people in a crowd.
Yeah, right.
Every sort of.
We don't need that headline.
Right. I did actually accidentally whomp a very old lady in the head, and she's like, "I'm okay.
I loved it. Honestly, Soledad, you could whomp me in the head, and I would be.
She was kind of nice that way, but I was like, "Oh God, I'm so sorry."
Before we get into your documentary, which was like incredibly powerful, and we recommend everybody go see it, because we have you, and we were just talking about the situation in Cuba, and you are a daughter of a Cuban immigrant. We wanted to get your take specifically, because part of what we were talking about is like this complicated, is like some Cuban Americans are like cheering for the regime to fall. And some Cubans are like, this is an absolute humanitarian disaster. And the United States is doing what it always did in Cuba, which is strangle it out for its own political ends. How do you read this moment?
Yeah, all those things are true, right? I mean, I was in Cuba in June, and it was the first time actually in a long time. I usually go every 2 years to visit family and sort of do art project, tour art museums and visit galleries. And it was the first time I had really seen like kids in the street begging. That just is not how it works in Cuba, at least from the last time I'd been there. But it was also interesting because I had a chance to sit down and have great conversations with people who worked in the government who were like, listen, people who are working in the government even have outside jobs. Remember, that wasn't allowed. I met people who purchased their own homes. Again, that's extremely unusual. So we've been seeing this. It's just been devolving for a while. And so I'm not, surprised. I mean, the president shaping it as like make a deal is always kind of typical for him, I think. So I'm nothing there surprises me. But, Cubans have been through a lot of very difficult times before. This is not the first administration that's, sort of thought about how they could influence or, put a finger on the scale in Cuba. And they have, made it through the 80s, obviously, and then since after that as well, multiple times. So Cubans are very resilient and very resourceful. Unfortunately, they've had to learn to be, which I think is horrific. But, again, I think it's very rare in any kind of policy conversation where a country is just like, we're here to help.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially our country. I mean, like with all due respect to us, we're not very well known.
Maybe every country, right? It's very rare that people just, I think there's often this bigger vision of what can we get out of it. And listen, I've talked to, many Cubans in Cuba who are, very conflicted. The older ones really understand what the U.S. has done, politically, historically. Cuba's a very young country. So there's a lot of younger people who actually haven't experienced a lot of the stuff that happened in the 80s. And so they don't have the same mindset. And a lot of Cubans, who've had the opportunity to get out, even though there was a fledgling entrepreneurial base that they keep trying to grow. It's really challenging.
Yeah.
It's sad because Cubans are the best, the food's the best, the people are the best, the music's the best.
Cuba, I spent some time reporting in Cuba, and I truly fell in love with the country. And it's interesting, and then we'll move on and talk about your documentary. It's interesting because I was studying HIV/AIDS and then ended up like also seeing some of like the prostitution community. And it was interesting that the actual prostitution that I saw, it wasn't the prostitution that was the stigma. It was that they needed jobs outside of the government, you know, like that it was like that they needed to make money in this other way. So when you talk about that, it's such an interesting culture.
Yeah, there's a huge percentage of people who, even if they have a job in the government, need another job, and a large number of people who have an outside job, which, as you know, was never allowed, and certainly no one would ever admit it.
And nobody admits it. That's the taboo, is the needing of the job.
People are very, very open about they cannot live on what the government's, you know, providing them.
Whoa.
Yeah. Well, my thoughts vary with Cuba, right? You know, every day I see it, and it's such a special place. And I guess before we move on, is there anything that Americans can and should be doing? Because this is a story that feels like it's, you know, like down the list of things that we're paying attention to right now.
Well, you know, I think it is. I mean, don't you feel like there's just this fire hose of information coming at you every day? And you're like, I've got to pick these 17 things I'm going to focus on. Yeah. And then like the one fun thing that's fun to talk about so I don't lose my mind. So yeah, I think really at this moment in time, just understanding what's happening. It's so complicated. There's lots of great books about Cuba. You can just Google and ask, you know, what's the best read? But you know, and really, because it's very hard to really get a grip on what's been going on in Cuba over the last many years.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what's happening in this country, because we watched your incredible documentary, The Devil is Busy.
In other chaos.
Right.
In other bad news.
And, you know, first of all, one of the questions that I had for you about this documentary is, I was wondering, was this filmed like during the 2024 election?
It was filmed right after the end of Roe v. Wade, right? We actually started working on it before because we knew. I mean, I knew.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's not when I meet somebody who didn't know. I'm like, really? Because I knew. You could tell the way the Supreme Court justices were answering questions.
Called me hysterical in 2016, where I was like, they were like, no, it's
never. Okay. You just watch how justices answered questions and you're like, yeah, Anyway, we knew, so we raised money in order to be able to think about like, okay, what is the story? What is the doc? So once Roe v. Wade ended, we would be able to really understand the impact. We wanted to document like, what is the impact? Eventually, we settled on a clinic outside of Atlanta, Georgia, and we were given really great access. Our directors, Geeta Gandabir and Crystal and Hampton, they're just really, I mean, it requires a lot of trust and a lot of being able to understand how to deal with very vulnerable people in a really challenging moment. And they're both fantastic at that as they navigated talking to, you know, sometimes they're called clients, sometimes they're called patients, and seeing like, can we follow you through what is unfolding? Because people deserve to understand. It's interesting how many, I mean, I've done some reporting on abortion clinics issues, not a lot, but you realize the degree to which there's a lot that you never see. You know, narrative wise, you would think it's 16-year-old girls flooding clinic. You know, it's in our documentary, you see these middle-aged women, right, going in with their partner. At one point, there's a woman who is told that she can have an abortion. She's under that 6-week mark. Mm-hmm. Some people are turned away, some people can. And she starts to cry and laugh and cry. And it's one, again, the few times that you're trying to like capture the actual emotion of people. Often I think abortion's like, there's this or there's this. Right. And the reality to me seems to be, it's just complicated, right? It's just very nuanced and it's complicated. And I think our documentary really captured that through the eyes of the woman who's a security guard, who's deeply religious. And yet, right? I mean, it's a very unusual, if I were to run down the street and poll people and said, listen, I'm doing a doc on an abortion clinic and the person is really religious, 99% of the people would think, oh, you must be talking about the protesters.
Right. That's what I thought at the beginning.
Yeah. And so again, that I think it's what makes this doc really special and interesting. And
Yeah.
and
nuance.
complicated, because it is complicated. It is complicated.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. There's that moment in there where one of the doctors talks about the fact that like this is going to start affecting where people go and practice. And I was really struck by the moment where they're looking at a case and they're going, oh, I think it's okay if we perform the abortion, but I'm not sure. It's a fetal abnormality. Let me tell. And so I think and we had Jessica Valenti on here last week, who does Abortion Every Day, who does incredible work on this. And to think of like what we have seen just since then,
Yeah.
like what has been the reaction to people seeing those moments in the documentary of doctors saying like, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to practice in that state.
Yeah.
I
I mean,
can't
a
do my
couple of
job.
things, right? Doctors saying they're just going to leave the profession altogether or leave the community where they are. We've seen that. I mean, of course, if you're worried about legal repercussions, where you could not just lose your license, but you could go to prison. I mean, clearly. And so I think this doc really spelled out what is unfolding across the country right now. People debating exactly how terrible is the abnormality, so that if someone triple checks this, will we be in some case responsible and thought not to have done our work correctly? And so we have to protect ourselves. I mean, it's so interesting. And, we've seen that in other states as well, right? Where the patient has to get so sick or near death before the doctors say, well, now we can intervene because now you're near death, so we can help you. We've seen that on front page news in many states. So I think that it's not, it's exactly it's reflective of exactly what is unfolding. It's no surprise. Why would you stay and be an OBGYN? And many schools, you can't even get the education to get the full training, the full scope of training to be an OBGYN. So I think it's really, having a chilling effect on doctors for legal reasons, for emotional reasons, right? I mean, imagine every single day we start the doc with Tracy, who's the security guard, pointing out all the areas that she double checks to make sure there's not someone hiding in order to deflate
her. Yeah,
absolutely.
It was scary.
Same. I thought the same thing. I'm like, oh my God, this is such a terrifying way. And she's very matter of fact, about kind of what she does. She knows the protesters by name. The protesters, served time in prison in some cases for violent acts. So I think she's a realist about what the risks are, not just to herself, but to everybody in the clinic and the patients, the clients of the clinic as well. So yeah, it's stressful in every which way. So it's not a surprise that people would say, I just can't take it. I want to go to a place where I can practice fully and not have to debate everything to make sure that at some point down the road, someone's not second guessing my medical opinion and I could end up losing my license or going off to prison.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So, I mean, this is totally up my alley. I love, it's so important to have work about reproductive care and reproductive justice. I'm curious, have you had any conversations with people potentially across the aisle from this issue who've maybe seen the film and have a new perspective? Because I often think when I see stuff like this, I'm like, I am totally the target audience for this, but the people that are in the bubble and are really kind of being served that propaganda about late term abortions, for example, or they're thinking it's the runaway 16-year-old and not knowing that it is oftentimes women who already have children or are dealing with health complications. Just curious to hear more about, outside perspectives who've watched the documentary and how it's touched them.
Yeah, historically, I think me as a reporter, there's always sort of this versus this, right? It's set up as a debate. And in this doc, it's actually sort of like, this is a day in the life of this woman who runs a clinic. So it's not here's my opinion and here's what I think. This is her life. And so we have shown this doc. We were in 14 film festivals, and then we've been across the globe actually as well with it. And so, in fact, the other day we did a screening in Atlanta, and this man came up to me and said, listen, I am pro-life, but that was a really good doc. So I'm not sure you change anybody's mind. I mean, I don't think it's kind of happens in real life where people are like, I saw it and I've changed my mind about whatever. But I do think it allows people to actually see what unfolds. It was also interesting, the number of men who had no idea how stressful it was for women. The number of men who said, I just never even crossed my mind what women have to go through. which I thought was interesting. And we've shown the doc in some red states. I mean, some of the film festivals have been in states that are very politically diverse. And, you know, I'm like, okay, I wonder how they're going to take this. But I think because it's framed as a day in the life of this is what she goes through to run the clinic from a security standpoint. I think it's very helpful to stay out of it as a reporter. Often when you're reporting these things, it's like, here's my point of view. Here's the people I picked to interview. Here's the story as I'm telling it. This is just following someone. And I think that's very helpful in the discussion because we often don't realistically see what happens in an abortion clinic. And that's unusual.
Before you go, I was thinking about this as you were talking about protesters and as I was watching it. So Don Lemon, this is a little bit of a tangent, but Don Lemon is being prosecuted by the government right now for going into a Minneapolis protest using the FACE Act, which was made in the 90s to protect people going into abortion clinics. I wonder what your thoughts are about this law that's used to protect this one thing that you care about being used against your colleagues and another institution you care about, which is journalism. Like, it's such a
law. At the end of the day, as you know, this is really much more of a legal question, right? And lawyers will take anything that they possibly can to support the case that they're going to try to bring to trial. So nothing, I mean, I feel like 2025 has been, and I'm sure 2026 as well, will be the year of like, nothing surprises me. Nothing surprises me. Like every day, I'm 20 times a day. I'm like, yeah, doesn't surprise me. You guys were talking about America's Next Top Model. I'm like, yeah, doesn't surprise me. Nope, nothing surprises me. I'm unsurprisable at every level. So I would say the same. I'm unsurprisable, right? And also that literally is what lawyers do. They're going to figure out how they can support their case and try to, you know, using whatever they have legally in their toolbox. So again, not surprised even slightly.
You know, I was looking at the feminist, the health clinic that is in the actual film, and we'll link to it, y'all, because you can donate there. I'm going to donate because I'm a huge fan of Tracy's now. But one of the things that I noticed is they don't just perform abortions. They do HIV testing. They do postpartum care.
Most clinics don't just do abortions. And, you know, I mean, and as one of the women in the doc says, right, with like the conversation starts at A and then never moves on from abortion. At Planned Parenthood, also, right? Planned Parenthood.
Medical screenings.
Literally, the percentage of abortions that are performed, you would think if you asked people, again, went out on the street and asked people, they'd be like, oh, it's got to be 97% abortion. It's not at all. It's a tiny percentage. And so people don't always understand that, like, shutting down or getting in the way of that particular clinic also means that woman's not going to get a mammogram. That person's not going to get a pap smear. That person's not going to get free health care generally across the board. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. It's been a way in which I think I'll just criticize journalists and journalism. Like we had really, there's a handful of people who knew that, but I don't think, whenever the public doesn't understand something, I really do feel like journalists have failed. Yeah. If there's this thing that has gotten out, and not just because of misinformation, but because journalists have done a poor job in reminding people that clinics are clinics, and you get rid of a clinic that provides abortions, you now have a place that women can't get a free mammogram or an affordable mammogram. So understand the implications. I think as journalists, we've kind of failed on that front, to be honest.
Well, you haven't, and everybody should go see the documentary, The Devil is Busy. It's now on HBO. It really genuinely, like, it is an intense 30-minute wild ride. It's nominated for an Oscar, deservedly so. And Soledad O'Brien, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your perspective.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Yeah.